In this short video, it is my intention to focus on Dr. Neil Smelser's approach to collective behavior theory and how it might be applied to social events and change in Afghanistan. Although Dr. Smelser developed his theories in the late 50s and published them in 1961, his framework may be used to explain and better understand violent social outbreaks in Afghanistan and elsewhere. I will also attempt to explain a possible linkage between collective behavior in the field and resistance to social change, especially as collective behavior seems to present itself in Afghanistan. During a visit to the capital of Afghanistan in 2011, there was an opportunity to speak with Afghans as well as Westerners involved in development work. It seems that many large publicly funded social change interventions have reported difficulties in meeting their objectives. Hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in programs are at risk. Large infrastructure programs may also have social change goals that are failing to be met as well. Of course, the often cited security issues can interfere with a large program. But is that a thorough explanation for marginal results or complete program failure? If one considers all the development projects launched to support these programs and the efforts of sincere and dedicated foreign development experts, what could be interfering with their success? Collective behavior theory may be one answer. Collective behavior has been around in some form or another since early in the 20th century, but it took Dr. Smelser to codify a definitive set of parameters for evaluating and predicting collective behavior. He called the components of this system determinants. We can use these determinants to analyze collective behavior events even in a far-off place like Afghanistan. More importantly, we begin to understand the underlying logic which social events are based on, even though they appear to be random outbreaks. Dr. Smelser identifies 6 determinants. First, Dr. Smelser names structural conduciveness. How physically or logistically easy is it for a social event such as a riot or a protest to occur? As we saw with the Arab Spring, the concentration of people in the cities and their ease of movement were structurally conducive. Dr. Smelser defines a second determinant, structural strain. Structural strain is exhibited in conditions such as economic deprivation, exaggerated class differences, or lack of political voice. The third determinant is growth and spread of a generalized belief. Dr. Smelser gave generalized belief several categories, including hysterical, wish fulfillment, norm-oriented, value-oriented, and so on. Growth and spread of such generalized beliefs are necessary conditions for an episode of collective behavior. Determinant 4 is precipitating factors. The first 3 determinants set the conditions, but a social event is not triggered until some type of stimulus. Precipitating factors give immediate substance. When Mohammed Bouazizi set himself on fire in 2010 to protest oppression, the generalized grievances of young people across the Middle East were also set ablaze, triggering the Arab Spring. His action was a major precipitating factor that caught public attention. The 5th determinant is mobilization of participants. In the months following the self-immolation of Bouazizi, social events occurred throughout the region. All the mechanisms may not be fully understood, but it seems that mobile phones and social media were a way in which leaders of the movements were able to communicate with each other and reach out to followers. Organized groups too, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, had been long waiting just such a chance to harness collective behavior for their own purposes. Dr. Smelser's final determinant has to do with the manner in which countermeasures are employed. These would be the actions that a government might use to prevent, interrupt, deflect, or inhibit the accumulation of other determinants. Dr. Smelser suggests cutting communication channels, unyielding action by security forces, outreach to social event leaders, and conciliatory public messages. I think it's safe to say that social control in the Arab Spring did not follow suggested mediation and led to the toppling of several governments. But the Arab Spring is an extreme case. I'm interested in Dr. Smelser's determinants and how they play out on a smaller scale. What could be happening in Afghanistan? The history of social events related to Quran burning provides an example. As to conduciveness, violent protests by Afghans are tolerated. They may worry ordinary citizens, but are not as violent as terrorist acts, although occasionally they are related and reinforce each other. In Afghanistan, structural strain is evident in the constant conflict as well as the deprivation which the general populace endures. It is well accepted that Afghans believe that the West disparages their religion at every opportunity. A self-described American pastor, Terry Jones, proposed a national Burn a Koran Day for September 11, 2010. Although this event did not initially happen on schedule, it worked to stoke resentment in the Islamic world, including Afghanistan. Afghans may have generalized feelings of impotency in the face of superior Western military and technology, which amplifies feelings of resentment and loss of control. Hence, we have a generalized belief that young Afghan men say that foreigners will disrespect their religion when given the opportunity. All that is needed is a precipitating factor. Although the aforementioned Terry Jones continued to cause a sensation with threats to burn a copy of the Quran, he didn't actually make good on that until 2011 and then again in 2012. And so it happened that indicators of Dr. Smelser's determinants were on high alert for an incident in Afghanistan. That incident was the alleged burning of a Quran by soldiers at a large American base. The reaction was predictable. And the alleged incident allowed radical leaders to connect the dots between Jones in the United States and U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Equally sad, it allowed the insurgency to claim the moral high ground and show empathy and brotherhood with the protesters. Media reporting on both sides did more to fan the flames than quell them. The rioters mobilized so quickly that some believe that existing networks were already in place for such a contingency. The first three determinants were already met, but lacked determinant 4, allegations of a Quran burning, to trigger a social event. That said, social control measures taken by the authorities seemed to work. Riot police and the Afghan army crushed any rioting that threatened civilians or property. And at the same time, the government urged calm and worked through friendly clerics to neutralize the protesters. The U.S. government apologized and promised to quickly investigate and punish any offenders. High-ranking U.S. military leaders spoke with U.S. Islamic clerics, and their apology was publicized. In this manner, social control, as defined by Dr. Smelser, was successful. In this case, rioting was brought under control, but public outrage shows us how social events may support existing social values and norms in Afghanistan. In this manner, it counteracts efforts to bring about change. Now, let's examine how collective behavior relates to large development and social change projects. Even though our military is being withdrawn, it is still likely many millions will be spent on social change programs. The rationale behind this effort goes back to the early days of the conflict. It was postulated that Afghan society itself contributed to the conditions that support the insurgency. I'm thinking of things like the warlike Pashtun Wali code of life that governs the thinking of tribal males. Then there's the subjugation of women and related economic and personal oppression. Another impediment is the general lack of respect for laws or the government. Western leaders concluded that Afghan society should change in order for it to become more peaceful. Now, let's review the first three determinants that must be in place before a social behavior event can occur. Structural conduciveness, structural strain, growth and spread of a generalized belief. Each of these determinants is related to fairly rigid belief systems that exist in Afghanistan. If those belief systems also work to impede social change, we could conclude that social change will be a difficult enterprise. A specific example may illustrate this difficulty and show how this rigidity plays out in actual practice. In my recent paper entitled Legitimacy of Social Change, I talked about a medium-sized U.S. intervention. The stated goal of the intervention was to alter the inherent distrust that locals have towards their government. It was called Afghanistan Stabilization Initiative East. The budget was $263 million. The primary thrust of the program was to launch small projects, ostensibly with Afghan government backing, and please the locals so much that they would begin to trust the government. It seems simplistic, but that was the operating premise. It could not have been clearly understood how collective behavior would impact the effort. Even if conduciveness and strain had changed, the distrust of outsiders was too much to overcome. The program failed to reach its goals as outlined in the Special Inspector General report seen here. Many small projects had been successfully launched, but local Afghans still did not trust their government. Therefore, a critical determinant for more upheaval and negative social events remains in place. Efforts to build the economy, tackle social inequities, build religious tolerance, everything is impacted. With violence as a background, one can imagine how fearful families become. Once again, that is not to say that social change is impossible, but the processes behind it and the tools to analyze it are complex. I believe Dr. Smelser's views may provide useful insights. Let's review. I've talked about collective behavior theory and how the determinants can be used to analyze social events, including riots, almost in real time. In one of our examples, the Quran burning, I showed how Dr. Smelser's determinants might be used to both estimate the predisposition to riot as well as steps to help extinguish it. I also looked at how understanding of collective behavior theory might make a development intervention more feasible. It might also be used to postpone an intervention if aspects of collective behavior theory predicted a failure. Finally, we talked about fear, generated by collective behavior social events, creating an atmosphere that is not conducive to social change. When families feel threatened, their first goal is self-preservation, not social change. Dr. Smelser attempted to codify collective behavior theory. He might be surprised to see his ideas in action today.